My name's Carl Tinian. Welcome to the Anglican Edge podcast. And today I have my good friend Nigel Dixon, the Reverend Nigel Dixon. And we're just going to have a conversation about church and thinking about our social climate in New Zealand and what does the future look like. So Nigel, welcome. Thank you for wearing your ecclesiastical kind of shirt.
So good. It's as close as I get.
Why don't we start? Well, just tell us where you're from, but how did your story start? How did you get into this current role?
Well, we go far back. It was during the charismatic movement when I was a student at university. My first kind of direct encounter with God. I just knew I was going to lead church. So I didn't know why I knew that, but I knew that after that experience. But I was kind of in a context, the Methodist Church, which I didn't really see a future in. And so I ended up, moving to Palmy and become part of the Pentecostal Church. So,
Palmy?
Palmy's to the north.
Thank you.
So I was a teacher at the time. I taught for a while and then ended up working as a pastor in our church, and some of my theological developments through Regent College in Canada. So I was a bit unusual in that I was theologically wired and interested, but my formation happened in that Pentecostal environment where leadership is valued. You're mentored to know how to lead, and at the end of that period, burned out. And ended up in quite a dark place, and wrote a book called Villages Without Walls, and that's how I began my connection with the Anglican Church. Really, that Bishop Justin down in Wellington read it. We spoke at a New Wine thing, and I met him, and we ended up having a few conversations about me working for the Anglican Church.
Right. Was that a surprise?
Well, I decided the Anglican Church was finished as an arrogant Pentecostal, so the thought of working for the Anglican Church was, why? Why would I do that? I didn't really have any interest. But the third coffee with Justin, I think I'll regret not giving this a go. So he was trying to get me to work half-time or more. I said, I'll give you a day a week.
Right, okay.
And that began my journey, what felt like into the belly of the beast, really, into something that I didn't understand and wasn't sure that I wanted to belong to, but my you language slowly became we language.
Okay.
As I slowly came to see that there was a whole lot of things that I valued.
Right. I can recognise that journey myself.
Yeah. I mean, when you come out of the charismatic movement and you come out of like very postmodern deconstructionism, you want a church that's fluid. That's your instinct.
Yeah.
You want a church that's unstructured and relational and not hierarchical and not institutional. Right. So all my instincts led me to a relational Pentecostal kind of environment, kind of like Vineyard. And
that wasn't hierarchical?
Not in a conscious way.
Right, okay.
But unconsciously, there was a relational hierarchy that was profoundly hierarchical.
We won't go there. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's definitely a different conversation. But I think one of the first things I became aware of was having been in a church meltdown, which led to my burnout. The Pentecostal church is built for progress, for change. It's adaptive to move quickly, to do whatever it pleases, to make something happen. And being in the Anglican environment, it's built for crisis. It came out of crisis over kings and popes and, a rejection of certain things. And so there was lots of checks and balances put in to limit unbridled leadership.
Well, that's interesting.
So the Anglican Church is built for crisis, and having been through a crisis where we didn't have the institutional strength to handle it, because in a crisis, relationships fail. and we only had relationships, so we had nothing to deal with the crisis because there was no systems and structures in place.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating.
So, in me looking at my future, I was looking for something where my contribution wouldn't be wasted by the next crisis that happened, where there was no ability to handle it, because crises will always come, you know. So I slowly gained this respect for the Anglican Church as I thought, these guys have actually thought about stuff. You know, there's 500 years of thinking about stuff.
It's a fair amount of time to work.
And some of it is kind of means that the Anglican Church is non-adaptive, slow to adjust to cultural change.
Yep.
But that has a certain strength to it when you're in a world of exponential social change, which is
uncertainty as well.
Yeah. So I guess I was looking for something that felt more solid than what I was experienced, and I think the sense of family I found in the Wellington diocese was really significant because I wanted to belong somewhere. I didn't want to be independent, and so you know the friendships I formed are still really significant for me. So yeah, there's the belonging factor, but there's also this belief that I think I realised that a church has to be able to be at peace with being an institution as well, because we carry Christianity into generations.
Yeah.
And if you don't come to peace with being an institution, the next crisis will take you out. So yeah, and as a really unstructured, chaotic person, coming into a church that actually has form that's thought about is really helpful to me, because it kind of counterbalances my weaknesses and unstructuredness.
So you finally got ordained as a vicar, reverend.
Yeah, that was really difficult for me because I felt like I was ordained, and the whole ordination process felt like to not recognise my story.
Okay.
So for me,
as being a pastor for 20 years.
But I did a couple of church transitions, and as a result of that, you know, I'd been through burnout, and I wasn't sure I wanted to lead a church again after the pain I went through. But I had a lot of fun, and the thing I noticed was that Anglicans like leaders who lead. And that surprised me, having witnessed so many Anglican leaders not being able to lead. But I thought, these guys don't mind leadership.
Okay.
But they don't like unaccountable leadership.
Okay.
So I thought I can do this, you know. And after those two transitions, Justin said, "Do you want to stay where you are and carry on?" And I was at All Saints in Palmerston North. And I said, yeah, I'm enjoying this. So he ordained me fairly quickly, but I'd been training all the clergy, so that had been part of my role, was leadership, setting up leadership development in the diocese. So he said, we can't really put you through all the hoops after you've done all the training.
Sure.
So he graciously fast-tracked me.
Right.
Which had a downside that I probably didn't learn Anglican craft as well as I could have. But I guess to put it in my language, I guess I'm an Anglican by choice.
Okay.
I chose this. I felt I could bring something to that, and that's what Justin recognised in the way he recruited me, I think. But also I felt like I was coming into a church that gave me room to be me.
Right. I
love how theologically wide the Anglican Church is and how theologically imaginative it is, even though some of our churches don't look like that.
Right. Okay.
So, and a lot of the people who had impacted me, like N.T. Wright and others, were Anglicans.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so I felt like I was coming into a really strong tradition that I wanted to be a part of. Whereas for a lot of people, they're Anglican by no choice. they've never
Like an
left the
inheritance.
silo.
Yeah.
Never left the silo. And so how to think imaginatively about the tradition is very difficult. Whereas I'm a late convert.
Yeah.
And so I approach it differently, and for some shallowly, probably, in the way they see me. But actually, I think I understand the strengths of the Anglican Church really well, and I can work with that.
Yeah.
And it brings a whole lot of things to me, which I really treasure.
And you carry on learning, which is kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is. So probably my journey, everybody knows me as shocked that I'm Anglican because they know how anti-traditionalist I was. But the more I've been around postmodern culture, I think actually the traditions matter more in this world now than in modernism, where there was some sort of solidity, but breakdown of the family, breakdown of relationality, really, under a kind of technological world that we have. I think the deep history is a big positive in the Anglican Church. Yeah.
Perhaps we could come back to that towards the end in thinking about sort of key ingredients and moving forward. I'm intrigued by your journey of learning and really observation. How long did you lead All Saints for then? What was before you moved?
6 years.
6 years. And then you moved.
And I've been in the diocese for about 3 or 4 years before that,
Okay.
doing translocal work. I was called Bishop's Chaplain for Parish Health and Development.
Okay.
So my window into the Anglican Church was primarily trying to help leaders grow churches.
Okay.
Which was really interesting, observing the lack of leadership instinct to grow a church.
You had worked as a leadership coach before that, though, hadn't you?
Yeah, I had. Yeah.
So you moved from Palmerston North to Tauranga.
Yeah.
And you have been leading a relatively large Anglican church in the heart of the city for, was it like 3-4 years now? 3 years?
2.5.
2.5. So was that a big shift? Was that a big cultural shift from Palmerston North or the style of church there? And what did that look like? How was that transition for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to move to Tauranga. I told my wife that I would never move here. So just probably like I thought I'd never be an Anglican, but arrogant prat that I am. But yeah, let's just say there was a God moment that changed everything. And we'd lived in Palmy for 38 years, so I'm from Christchurch originally. Carolyn grew up in Palmy. I had done the last 38 years there.
Wow.
So I had no intention, we had a lifestyle block, so I had no intention of leaving and moving to Tauranga, which felt like where I didn't want to be. You have to be a beach person to want to be in Tauranga, and I'm not a beach person.
Yeah.
So give me rolling hills any day.
Right, okay.
But anyway, God ambushed me, and so we ended up moving here for what felt like, because I had a great team back in Palmerston North, and it was just really starting to go off, and I was probably feeling like, okay, this could really go somewhere. But now I'm grateful God moved me. It does feel like I've moved to a place with way more potential for significant renewal.
Okay.
You know, so, and this is kind of this is a boom town. It's growing fast. It's totally dysfunctional. It lacks social infrastructure. It's got a lot of possibilities.
Yeah,
if we can
I think
get
you're
it
right.
together,
Yeah, give it 5 to 8 years.
which I don't have.
Okay. So, what have you noticed? Sort of in terms of where you're in a different diocese. So, what are the things that have really stood out to you in terms of, I suppose, doing a cultural audit, really, of the church here?
Oh, it's probably best to include the Wellington experience with this.
Okay.
Because while Wellington's more innovative and further on in its journey to renew itself, for lack of a better phrase, I think the challenges are really similar for both dioceses that I've experienced. And so my first observation is one of leadership crisis. I saw this in Wellington, even in younger leaders, where the leaders have never experienced a growing, healthy church.
Okay.
So they've grown up faithfully in Anglican context, most of them, but they've never seen a church grow or experienced a renewal in a church. And so they've come out of, let's just say, context of limited leadership imagination, and they don't know how to lead change because they haven't been mentored in leadership craft. Now, if you were to line that group up alongside a bunch of Pentecostals of the same age, the Anglicans would eat them alive theologically.
Yeah. But
the Pentecostals would eat them alive in terms of knowing what to do.
How to pivot through change and adjust, adapt. Yeah.
Yeah. And they, I mean, because pretty much everything is around leadership development in younger churches.
Yeah, and innovation is a major part of that.
Now, I'm not saying there's a lot of freedom because it's brutally hierarchical in its own way, but it's led to the campus model because they want to maintain hierarchy in more extreme ways than the Anglican Church does. But that's another thing. But yeah, definitely. What's my thought? Yeah, the challenge I saw in Wellington, and it's even more extreme here because we've got a more aged clergy, is a lack of experience of being outside the silo. Means that the only thing that we can do is try harder to do what we've been doing, and thinking there will be a different result, and there isn't. You can't get a different result when people see an aging, unimaginative traditionalism that has no cultural relevance. So that kind of challenge is in Wellington still. It's not as marked as it is here in Waipu, where the clergy are on average 20 years older. But what you have in Wellington though is still the challenge of leadership craft, because if you can teach it, but if people don't experience it or have a journey with somebody who knows what they're doing that's quite on the ground, they really struggle to build something healthy. And that's the crisis we're in right now. But it's also a social crisis. The absence of leadership craft in business and government is just plain for all to see.
Right. So
we're in a leadership crisis, full stop. So that's probably one of the first thing I'd say about my observation. One of the things I really appreciate about the Anglican Church is the room you get, theological room. There's potential for a way more diverse community because there's a lot more room. You don't have to be on the leader's page like you do in a Pentecostal circle. So I really appreciate that, but it can lead to a lack of clarity about what we're about and what we're trying to do because nobody's brave enough to make decisions.
Right.
So yeah, that.
So do you think, I mean, I guess, again, from my own observations of the Anglican Church, there's good infrastructure and systems that manage or keep things running, but I guess they keep the status quo in place. Does that work against, or how does that work against adapting and change? And
I mean, you can think you've done leadership when you set up a roster.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, I used to joke, that the Anglican Church would outlast the Second Coming because the rosters would keep going. Because it's literally, so long as we can fill those gaps, we can keep functioning. But that doesn't create any forward momentum or reveal any leadership imagination for what we are meant to be in our community. That just is The beautifulness of Anglican structure and tradition is that we can maintain ourselves with a minimum of energy. We've got a prayer book, we've got a roster. We don't even have to have a musician. We've got all contingencies that are allowed for,
and can be led by one person if needs be. If you've got a lack of administration,
so we can make this thing work any which way with the most limited resources.
Do you think it's been intentionally shaped that way? Like where there is a lack of, like it might be one clergy for the whole parish, one vicar.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at church history, the Catholic and the Anglican churches have acted in terms of training and in terms of setting up services that are carefully liturgised. They've really tried to make it idiot-proof so that anybody can do it and not make a mess. And that's probably an unkind way of looking at it. But you can turn up, open the book, do it, make a few inane reflections in a message, do the Eucharist, so long as you've done it by the book. Anybody can do that. And we've probably...
Like learning a script.
Yeah, it's like learning a script. And as Eugene Peterson says, it's a profession, one of the easiest professions to be fake in. Because you do this, you do that. On all levels, you've done your job.
As long as you've ticked the boxes.
Yeah, and that's a real risk. I think it's true in every. It's not just in the Anglican tradition that's risky, but in the Anglican tradition, because it's so carefully scripted in terms of liturgy, you can keep doing this till the cows come home without exerting any imagination, thought, or innovation. And that's really risky in a postmodern world which values creativity above all else.
And keeps changing.
Yeah, and keeps changing. So, some of the aspects of that are really crucial. I think the other thing that's really interesting in an Anglican setting, which coming out of Pentecostal, which is an extroverted spirituality, you come into an Anglican world, it's introverted spirituality.
Yeah, contemplative.
It's contemplative and isolationist.
Yeah, private.
Privatised
religion.
So the preference for silence, the preference for detachment,
private prayers.
Yeah, and the non-need to actively participate, and therefore people find that Anglican spirituality, which is very introverted, unwelcoming, because introverts.
Or they love it if they're an introvert.
But they want to be welcomed. If you're an introvert in a new place, you want to meet a person who makes you feel at home.
Yeah, okay.
So even if you're an introvert, you won't feel welcome there just because it's quiet. So one-to-one connection will mean you feel at home. But that tendency towards introversion is a real strength, because people in a busy world want to get in touch with themselves. But they also want to feel like it's a home where they are welcome and are relationally connected doing this.
So you're saying that the contemplative connection to an ancient rhythm of spirituality is deeply attractive, but it needs to be housed in something that's community-based and highly relational at the same time.
I mean, it's a universal that people are attracted to spirituality that gets them in touch with themselves.
Yeah.
But they're not universally attracted to traditional Anglicanism, in spite of the fact that we would see ourselves as occupying that space.
Yes, yeah, it's true. It's almost like we're close, but not quite close enough.
Yeah, one of the guys I coached when I was doing leadership coaching was a Buddhist, and he was in a process of burnout, and so we spent a lot of time together, and it was really interesting because I suggested he read Richard Rohr's book Falling Upwards.
Great book.
Yeah, it is. It's a great book, and it was really interesting his comment to me after reading it. He said to me, "I wish I'd read this book earlier." I said, "How come?" He said, "My impression of Christianity was believing the right things. And everybody who talked to me about Christianity, it was belief, and this is right, and this is true. and this is the way you do this or whatever. He said it was very prescriptive, and Richard Rohr's kind of approach to spirituality was very practice-centered.
Yep.
So he was recommending spiritual practices of contemplation, of whatever. And he said, I became a Buddhist because I was looking for a practice.
Wow.
And he said, I couldn't find any offer of practice in the Anglican Church, or any church for that matter. And so I became a Buddhist. And that really got me thinking, and I wasn't fully in the Anglican thing at that point. I hadn't kind of got ordained, but I was dabbling. But as someone who was dabbling and heading along, sitting in the back of an Anglican church, there was, even though there was a prayer book, the prayer book was ignored for the week. Now, it was used at the 8 a.m. service, but it was never used for prayer. Nobody used it during the week that I could ascertain.
In where? In Palmerston North?
Yeah. And so, it was interesting going along to becoming a part of the Dio team, because every time there was a rhythm of prayer and contemplation and praying for each other, which was a nice blend of the charismatic and the traditional. And I started to feel at home with that, because it was just like, there's a practice here. I want to be part of a church that has a practice. And I think the challenge for the Anglican Church is, we do the prayer book really well on a Sunday, and we try to do everything. We do prayers, we do this, we do that, we do everything. And so, therefore, people don't have to do anything during the week. But actually, unless we're a way of life, and we have a rhythm of life together, we won't continue to exist, because it's just an radically individualized spirituality that is bought into a consumer thing of turning up on Sundays, and nothing else happens that's communal, because we've got this radically individualized spirituality that we have idolized.
What do you see as the role of liturgy in a practice, both, I guess, individually and communally? Like because I kind of get this sense that it is attractive for unchurched, dechurched postmoderns, but how much is too much?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that question is I'm not sure. I'm still on the journey. So,
because earlier you said overly liturgized, and overly scripted. So, but it seems to be it's also beautiful. So can you just talk about that a bit?
I mean, when I said overly liturgized, it's because everything feels rote. Mm-hmm. How a church service feels is really crucial. And so how personal the liturgy feels is really important. Okay. So I love, when I burned out, I moved far more into liturgy than I had, because you needed well-worn words to carry you. Yeah. Words that weren't just yours because you didn't have any words.
Ancient words.
Yeah. Yeah. So I came to respect that. But doing the 404 service week in, week out, that seems to lack theological imagination. And I know there's the 456 and the 476. We've got three options that are official.
Some variety.
But there's variety, but very similar in the genre, Yeah. And so Celtic daily prayer was a beautiful thing. I used that for quite some time. But now a lot of our services, writing the liturgy, trying to... For me, liturgy has that ability to teach a generation scripture who don't read.
Yeah, it's very good.
So, we've been doing a John's Gospel liturgy over Epiphany. And part of it is we're making people say scripture and theologically reflect on scripture, and hopefully use some of the great prayers and other things like St. Patrick's Prayer or whatever, So part of it is trying to create for a generation who don't read a reservoir of truth through
regular practice. Yeah. And I think there's real power in saying it together, isn't there? It's almost like we're agreeing together. There's a corporate coming together over a text.
Yeah,
does that break against individualism?
I think the call and response is such a deep tradition in the church. I think it's worth persevering with as a formational practice. I like it being blended with contemporary worship, but hopefully worship that has lyrical depth.
Yeah.
But and I think that blend of the ancient and future is really crucial in how you use the visual as well, which I'm not so good at. You're better at, in terms of thinking with a visual imagination.
Yeah.
All those elements, I think, create texture for worship. And, probably it's fair to say I got tired of the kind of the half-hour worship package followed by the
Preach.
45-minute preach after the offering, and I as a model I didn't like that. I love the peace. I love confession. I love those elements that create texture in our worship. But the same old words. I think if we don't create newness, we get immunity to the depth of the truth. So it's always trying to change the angles so that we keep getting hit by our liturgy rather than getting immune to it. But I think there is a deep faithfulness that is formed through liturgical practice, and how we do it every day is the question. How do we create practice that happens every day rather than just on a Sunday? And that's not easy in our world, which is time poor and distracted.
So, what role do you think, thinking about where we can say Western societies are, we can say New Zealand society, what role does the church have to play in this kind of emerging post-COVID world? And what do you think the future looks like? What if we were to drill it down to Waipu, what does the future look like for Waipu? What do we need to move towards?
I mean, part of us facing the world as it is, rather than the way we want the world to be right now, is that we have been moved to the margins of society. We're used to being at the centre, and used to people coming to us for because we have communal integrity and the respect of government and everything. And so we still have a little bit of the residue of that we are credible as a church because of our historical kind of foundations. But we are insignificant in terms of numbers, and I guess we've got a real challenge of irrelevance. So
especially if we keep shrinking.
Yeah, we don't know even how to speak to the world because we are so removed, even from the challenges of 30 and 40-year-olds, let alone 15-year-olds. So yeah, part of our challenge is facing our new reality that we are marginalised because we're part of the gone world. What we represent is gone from the public imagination, and that's true for all of the church, So I think seeing ourselves as socially marginalised means that we have to face the world afresh and say, how do we reach this world? Because we're no longer at the centre of it. But all social change comes from the edge. So, if you look at the way the gay community was in the 1960s, say, they were utterly marginalised. They might not have been prosecuted like they were in the 50s, but they were utterly marginalised. But now you look at where they are now. They're in the centre of society, highly influential in government. And you think, well, now they've moved from edge to centre, and they strategise to do that. We find ourselves in the opposite direction. We've been moved against our will to the margins of society. And we have to posture ourselves facing our reality that we are there, and we need to be there and face the fact that we have a world we have to reface and figure out how to reach it and serve it most of all. Otherwise, our voice will be silent. or lost. And probably the thing that worries me most is the lack of urgency in most leaders.
Yeah,
that
true.
We don't really need to change. So there's a deep resistance to the concept of change because we're being faithful and we're doing all the right things that have always been done. And because as you get older, you don't easily embrace new ideas. Age of clergy and the fact that people have generally lived in the echo chamber, only hearing a certain sound, means that we don't have cultural resources to navigate the world we're in. I think it's very hard to be innovative when you've spent your whole life not being innovative. It's hard to become a leader if you've never led. I kind of said to somebody who was selecting leaders, they were looking at and pointing somebody, and I said, okay, they're 50, if they ever led anything successfully. And they said, oh, I don't think so. I said, well, they'll probably fail and you shouldn't appoint them. Because if they've never led anything, they're not going to become a leader now. It's too late. And that's the brutal fact, but, the lack of urgency to actually even consider change more radical than adding a song to a service is, sometimes difficult.
What signs of hope would you see then if you were to offer hope to a community that feel like that maybe there isn't much hope, or that they are sad about, I don't know, but yeah, maybe have given up on that? What signs of hope are there to hang faith on?
I'm incredibly hopeful because I think God's committed to his church and the Spirit's committed to moving. And the Spirit, I think, always finds human hearts who want to see something happen and are praying for it irresistible.
Right, that's good.
So, kind of coming here, there was definitely an older 100 people here who were despairing as to whether they could live again. And I've been surprised at how quickly the church has changed, merely because the people are up for it and they're praying for something.
Yeah.
Because they know they're dying. And it probably helps that I kind of am up for change, and I was clear I wouldn't come unless they were up for change. But I think there is something irresistibly beautiful about a bunch of people who just want their church to live, even if it means it will be less comfortable for them. And I think there's always hope for a community when people want their grandchildren to love being there.
Yeah.
Or their children to be there, And but that has the implication, how do we make this a place they love? And we don't need to compromise on some of the key stuff. We'll still do confession, we'll still do the peace, we'll still have a liturgy, but how do we make it actually a place which, our children and grandchildren love?
Do you think that is a church that's more than just a service on a Sunday in today's climate?
It's got to be. And, if COVID revealed anything, and all churches are still tracking out of that kind of period, it exposed that a whole lot of churches aren't communities, and therefore they are terminal. So I think a lot of people realised that the community wasn't there for them. It didn't function as a community.
In terms of a place of belonging?
Yeah, as a place of belonging. It was a place of a service performance, but it wasn't a place of genuine belonging and relationality.
Okay.
And I think we're still climbing out of that, and we are seeing quite a radical change, even in the last 5 years, of falling church attendance. But I think COVID exposed that actually it doesn't make any difference if I'm not there, because actually community is participative and relational, And most churches, like Pentecostal churches and Anglican churches and so on, are a service performance rather than a participative community. And the only thing that's going to give churches longevity, I think, is being genuine communities. But operating in an institutional, generational framework that we've got, this has to last beyond our generation and keep going. So there's some real tensions there, because you have to have institutional integrity, but you've got to have this core communal culture that people can flourish in. And, you know, part of our diocese flavour is this flavour of human flourishing. Well, people flourish in genuine communities of generosity and hospitality, celebration. And we're not those. By and large, churches are not those things. And how we become that, that's the leadership challenge. That's on leaders.
Yeah, sure.
To help navigate, you know.
I'm aware that we are probably running out of time, so could we finish on I'd like you to offer me some advice. And I'd like you to perhaps first imagine that I'm a vicar in my 30s or 40s, which is nearly true.
Dream on.
Right. Well, it's true in terms of my age, not the vicar part. I'm listening to this talk. I'm in my 30s and 40s. I've got a small parish church where there's lots of signs of hope, but challenges too. What advice would you give me? And then I want you to give me the same advice, imagining I'm a vicar in my 50s, 60s.
Okay, so the challenge when you're a younger leader is you've generally got a lot of passion, but you don't know how to navigate. So I'd say to any young leader, learning how to listen to your instincts is really important, and it can be quite intimidating with older people, knowing what to do, because you're still learning your leadership craft. So having a mentor and people you journey with who believe in you and will help you process so you don't make a big mess and lose leadership integrity so people don't trust you. So, you know, it takes a while. You know, there's a great phrase in the book, you know, Canoeing the Mountains. People won't follow you off the map unless they see that you can operate on the map. So learning how your leadership craft so people feel safe and trust is really crucial. So as a younger leader, have really good mentors and find people who are bigger than you. And ask the people who you don't think will be interested in you because you're not significant enough. Don't ask the little people who you feel safe with.
Yes, good.
You know? So that, I think that's crucial. I think the other thing is keeping learning and finding people smarter than you that, you know, I totally think that, you know, most young leaders overuse their passion and then it goes wrong and they lose confidence. And I think people to process with finding the smart people who, you know, I wish I'd found them earlier, or I don't think I would have burned out. The second thing I'd say to young leaders is don't stay in the Shire the whole time. So the hobbits had to leave the Shire to become themselves. They had to experience other worlds to be able to go back to the Shire and clear it of all their enemies when they returned, you know. And so going to other networks and experiencing other ways, even secular contexts. You know, a lot of the coaching stuff I've learned has been secular stuff. It hasn't been church-based. And, you know, like studying Myers-Briggs really helped me in my leadership craft. You know, so all those kind of things. Be a learner for the rest of your life. You know, thoroughly read some people so that you have a voice within you that's not just your own voice, but the sound of other voices coming out. So, there's this great Eric Bibb song, he's talking about pop staples, and he's singing, I hear your voice inside my own. And, that's a beautiful line, because I think, most of the time I just sound like some kind of strange blend of Walter Brueggemann and N.T. Wright, some strange marriage of their theologies, but, we're shaped by others.
What we get,
It's good. And I think the other thing I'd say to a young leader is find the message you're prepared to die for. Most people have a whole bunch of messages, but they don't have a message.
What do you mean by that? I assume not just a talk that you do. You mean something that's...
Yeah, what's the core sound that God's put in you that you're prepared to give your whole life for?
Okay.
And that means all your messages will clip into a sound, and it has its own integrity. And it takes you a while to find what your sound is, but as a young leader, you're trying to say, what is the heartbeat of God that God's put in me through my salvation experience, through the way God's led me? What is the sound I have? Because you've reached some level of maturity when you have a message. Okay?
That's cool.
So that's what I'd say to young leaders. Older leaders,
imagine older, so sort of maybe, 5 years off retirement.
Like me.
I didn't know you were that old.
Yeah, I'm 64, so, I'm...
Yeah, well, that are thinking about what they leave behind, thinking about becoming an elder, komatua. Yeah, what would you do if you're in that place now, and can you do anything?
It's really interesting. In the Old Testament, the priests, after they're 50, weren't meant to do the sacrifices. They were meant to help. And I think the second stage of your life should always be marked by the fact that you help others find their place, rather than filling all the gaps yourself. And in an Anglican setting, most of those gaps are administrative organisation, ironically, which is not what any true priest is called to, but that seems to mark out what makes you credible.
Right. Darn it, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you're so in trouble, and as am I. But that whole the whole shift in leadership, second stage of your life, you move from I guess the pursuit of success to the pursuit of significance, and moving from generating your own thing to regenerating others. Regeneration is Jung calls it, I think. Being a regenerative leader. And so if you are in this zone and you're not thinking about legacy and what you're passing on, what you're releasing in others, and enabling people to find their way, if you don't think like that, you are the cork in the bottle by the time you've reached the stage of life. Because you should have gone through a leadership transition of not doing leadership, but releasing leadership.
Right.
And that's the big challenge in the church today, is very few leaders become people who give away leadership. It's a universal crisis, because the leadership craft is learned late or not at all, and there's therefore that inability to help let other people grow, because you control rather than and the worst kind of leadership is controlling leadership.
Would that be interpreted in some context as, okay, so I should delegate and give out more jobs, that such and such can hand out sheets at the door, and such can serve me with the Eucharist?
That's death by roster again. It's I mean, that's perceived, the giving out of jobs is perceived as delegation and people development. It's not. You're not growing a person by giving them a task. If you get them handing out bulletins on Sunday or helping them with the Eucharist when they're a lawyer who does high-level stuff during the week, you have actually trivialised their life.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got on the wavelength of what they're called to, you are merely filling your roster.
So it's empowering people into their calling and supporting them in the emergence of new things.
Yeah, and helping them find a faith that fits their lives. Most people are under all sorts of kind of profound stresses in their lives because the world is so dehumanizing, and it asks so much of them that they weren't created for. You know, so if the spirituality we're giving people doesn't work in the marketplace, they will rightly try and find a way to find a spirituality that does. And and the move out of church is partly reflected by the fact that our spirituality fails the road test. You know, it's not working because we haven't helped people discover themselves and to flourish and to find practices and a way of life together as a community that really work for them.
That's good.
So the challenges are fun. I mean, I was born for this, so you know, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but that's part of the joy, because being a leader places you in a helplessness zone where you need God because you're weak, but He's strong.
Yeah.
But you will feel helpless a lot of the time. For young leaders, I'd say, you know, just because you feel helpless, that's not definitive. It's just the fact that you need God.
Yeah.
And
we need one another, I guess, leading into other people that can bring things that you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're all limited. And there's only 2 or 3 things I'm any good at. You know, and I understand what those things are now, and I try to do my leadership around those things and find people who bring what I haven't got.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I guess, I think that's the mark of a mature leader. You look around and you've actually got a team who could do it if you weren't there.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing we discovered in Wellington is that the inability of people to build teams, and I see it here as well in this diocese, passing out tasks is not the building of a team.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't regard myself as a great team builder, but I think I'm good at seeing people. You know, that's my strength.
Yeah.
I'm, you know, but I would say to any leader, you know, your attention to finding people and discovering what they are is probably one of the big joys of leadership. Seeing people fly doing what they're doing.
Great.
It's just beautiful.
Cool.
So
thank you. I think we better stop there. So a big exhortation to look at the people around you and your community and start seeing them with fresh eyes and with potential. And
yeah,
that's cool.
I mean, I'll say to anybody, if you don't find joy in this, do something else, because you don't get paid enough in this job to not have fun. You've got to have fun because the pay's crap. We all know it, and because of that, we end up with this entitlement that I deserve better than this because I'm not paid very well, or whatever. Or we get very cynical. But I've chosen this. I love what I do, and it's a privilege because God called me into it. And you know, finding joy in it is crucial, because otherwise we'll measure out whether I'm getting enough back. You know, and that's not the way this works. Christ became rich. When Christ, who was rich, became poor, that we might become rich. So I see what I've been given as such a privilege. It's a joy. I wish I saw that widespread, but I don't. You know, there's a lack of joy.
Yeah,
that really disturbs me. And
hopefully we can see that begin to change in the years ahead.
Amen to that. Amen to that. It's meant to be fun.
Yes, it is. More food together and parties and stuff.
Yeah. Just, you know, a proper community is a joyful place.
Yep. Okay, well, you've been listening to The Anglican Edge. My name's Carl Tillian. I've been interviewing the wonderful Reverend Nigel Dixon. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you.